Hello, LA Progressive friends and family. Today it's my pleasure to have with me Andrew and Deanna Joseph. Andrew and Deanna I met a few years ago. They are the proud parents of Andrew Joseph III, who was unfortunately killed several years ago in Florida due to acts taken by a local sheriff's department there. And I'm going to let them tell as much of that story as they choose to. We also have with us James Farr, who is the founder of Conversation Live and a frequent contributor to the LA Progressive. We're going to have an informal conversation. So good morning, family.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. It really means a lot to be among family and to be able to share Andrew with the community at large and understanding how impactful his life was to us and the movement going forward. So I want to just say to the LA Progressive family, it does my heart well to be here and to be able to talk a little bit more about my baby, Andrew Joseph III.
Thank you.
Initially, we are from New Orleans, both me and my wife, and we relocated here to Tampa after Hurricane Katrina. And we were fascinated by the lifestyle here in Florida with the green trees and Florida. It was brand new scenery. And as we visit New Orleans, it was still slow in returning after Hurricane Katrina. There was limited schools, the parks wasn't open, there was a skeleton fire department as well as a police department. So in the midst, we had opportunities to return back to New Orleans, but chose to stay here in Tampa for the resources. And it was here in Tampa, we allowed my son to go to the Florida State Fair, which is an annual event here in Florida. All the schools are out of school, and they provide free tickets to the students for a day off at the Florida State Fair. So my son was preparing to go to this fair. He went to get his hair cut. He requested to go to the mall to get him a new outfit because it was a social type of event for young people. So him being an 8th grader, he was used to being in the community. He goes to the mall by himself, and he goes to the movies, and he goes to Busch Gardens, and he's used to being in the community. We never had an issue out of him. Honor roll student, kind of child parent to pray for. But while at this fair, he was detained by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. He was standing on a ride and noticed that some of his football buddies were being detained by the Sheriff's Department. He got off the ride and went to check on his football buddies, and they were being detained by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department, the jump out team, the gang task force at the Florida State Fair. His friends was physically being attacked by these sheriff officers. As he approached the sheriff that was detaining his football buddy, his name is Robert. Robert's hat fell off as well as one of his shoes came off. Andrew picked up his hat and his shoes and returned to Robert. Robert said the first time that he had seen Andrew that night, he said, Andrew, do you see how the police are handling this? He said, yeah, man, what you guys did? Well, why are you in trouble? He said, we didn't do nothing. So he asked the sheriff that was detaining his friends, what did they do? Why are they being arrested? And the sheriff asked Andrew, do you know these kids? He said, yes, I do know them. I play football with them at the park. I was supposed to come to the fair to meet them. Well, at this point, you need to come with us. And he's like, for what? I didn't do anything. He instructs his partner to get Andrew. And now he's involved. So they paraded him across the fairgrounds, detained him, took photographs of him, fingerprinted him, placed him in a sheriff's vehicle, drove him off of the fairground property, and basically abandoned him on the side of the road with instructions on not to return to the fair. And as my son was trying to make it back to the safety of the fair without notifying any parents, guardians, coach, or preacher, anybody, just abandoned him on the side of the road. My son was hit on top of I-4, which is a major interstate here in Tampa, 8-lane interstate, where he was abandoned at. He was hit by 19-year-old Jonathan Hatfield, a white male, coming from the fair going to the casino. You know, in our little small world, Jonathan Hatfield was coming from the bar going to the bar. Jonathan Hatfield wasn't given a bread test. He wasn't given he wasn't given a ticket. He was allowed to leave the scene, but my sons remained all over the front grill as if nothing had ever happened. This was, of course, February the 7th, 2014. And from that day on, we have been fighting for answers and justice and just some kind of understanding on what happened that night. And because of qualified immunity, what they filed real early in the proceedings, it protected them from having to share all that information with us. So we've basically been 9 years without any answers, without a police report, without a ticket stub, or any kind of information until we was granted the opportunity to go to court. We went to court. The sheriff was deemed liable for unwrongful death, and we were awarded $15 million. And then recently, maybe this being 6-7 months later, the sheriff has filed another grievance with the court that's surrounded around qualified immunity, that he won't have to pay these monetary issues that was mandated for him to pay by the courts. So basically, that's where we are today. We're waiting on a ruling from the circuit court on which direction we're going to move forward or backward or sideways. And, you know, it's just an emotional roller coaster. It's the hardest feeling in the world to have to go to the graveyard to visit your child, especially when you have no answers. And, you know, everything that they told us was out of character for my son. They told us that he was wilding at the fair. Nobody knew what the meaning of that was, but he was wilding at the fair. He was involved in gang activity, and because of these gang activities, he was ejected from the fair. It's not only happened to my son, who was 14 years old, but 99 other kids that was at the fair, juveniles that was at the fair that night. And my son was fortunate enough to be 14 years old, because this is throughout the whole 99 kids that was ejected, the youngest child there was 10 years old, that was abandoned and placed it on the side of the road after being fingerprinted and photographed by the sheriff's department. And as we voiced these concerns, the statement from the sheriff's department was, you know, that they had been doing this for over 50 years. And, you know, there was more than sure that what they were doing was correct and lawful. And when in return, it really wasn't. And just brief history, this fair has been going on here locally in Tampa for over 100 years. And every year is this a major incident that happens at this fair. Originally, this fair was where the slaves were sold at. After church, you would come to this fair and see the slaves being hung and disciplined because of erroneous activities. And we went from where they trained and hung the slaves to the separation of the people and discrimination. You know, the black people weren't allowed to go to the fair with the white folks, so the black people had their own particular day to go to the fair here locally, which was named Negro Day. And this was the day that all the black people was able to come to the fair for free. And then progressively they went from Negro Day to Midnight Madness, which was another total catastrophe, to where they all were when my son died in 2014, Student Day. But nothing had changed except the name. Because on Student Day was the day that they gave all the free tickets out, so the inner city black kids was able to come to the fair for free, just like during Negro Day. So the population at the fair was still the very same. And if you can put my honor roll 14-year-old perfect type of child in the car and drive him around the block 3 or 4 times and abandoned him on the side of the road, that's a modern day lynching. So nothing has really changed with this fair until the death of my son. Since then we have seen a 360 degrees rotation type of change in the policies and procedures that governs the fair. And believe me, we have to fight tooth and nail for every step forward that we took in this situation. So basically, that's where we are now.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that story, especially for those who don't know the story. James or Deanna?
I'll yield to Deanna, of course, but I would want to add something.
As I listen to my husband speak, and and we share all the intricate details of a system that failed us on so many levels. It was a multi-tiered level of failures that existed upon all these entities that we were supposed to trust or felt the need to trust. When you think about the schools, we entrust our children to the schools, and then to have the ultimate betrayal of that trust. When you think about all of the layers of betrayal that has come with this system, is a reality that I know many people don't see or fail to see, but it exists. And you'll never know it until you had to live through it and have this life experience that is so altering, life altering. I will never be able to see the world as a good and happy and loving place again because of all that I've experienced in this life experience that I did not ever ask for, nor was I or my child acting in any criminal or harmful way to be able to have this type of rejection and humiliation. So a lot can be unpacked from everything that my husband has said, but I want to now just have the world and have the listeners understand all the intricate parts that many people don't have a chance to talk about, because normally an interview or a news clip is limited to maybe a few seconds, and then it's clipped and cut, and you never get the full picture. So I'm grateful that we have that opportunity to provide that full picture today.
Yeah, Sharon, and I would add, for context, and then thank you, Deanna and Andrew, for sharing that. But just to kind of paint and kind of pull out some things that both Andrew and Deanna spoke about. The problem with the adultification of this young boy. He was a 14-year-old child that was, and an adult shouldn't have been treated in the same way, but he was treated in such a way that almost as he was an adult. And when I spent time down there in Florida, I think within the first 36 hours, I had a full understanding. When you hear these parents say this boy was their golden child, all of that came into context after meeting friends of his, classmates of his, other community members. It really solidified, even though we don't believe the narrative all the time that police put out. We understand the propaganda and the spin, and the first narrative that goes out is kind of the one that sticks. But I was able to quickly understand who the young Andrew Joseph III was on his way to be, and completely the love and family that he had surrounding him. Andrew mentioned where they dropped him off at. So I want to paint this for the LA audience, and Sharon, you can appreciate this. Imagine you're dropped off on one side of the Rose Bowl up by the 210 freeway, and now you have to find your way back to the 134. It was a completely dark and desolate area, completely unsafe. And so just the level of negligence, but even before that, these children were being children. Their developmental behavior of running and having fun at a fair is what children and what kids do. But when you heard the testimony from one of the officers in court, it had a narrative of predatory behavior, almost as if the young Andrew got picked off because he was kind of on the outside of the group. So he fixated on another young boy's clothing and the color of the clothing. So it really almost seemed like this, like, as I said, this predatory type behavior. The enforcement, the jurisdiction are we talking about rules or laws? And so you saw at many twists and turns throughout the litigation of this case that police continue to try to craft narrative to fit and almost attempt to exonerate them. And I'd love to, if Andrew and Deanna can tell a little bit more about the trial, but I don't think I've ever seen a more fair judge in my life, and how she administered that trial, adjudicated that trial. So I'll turn it back over to one of them, or you, Sharon, if you want
No, I have, thank you, Andrew. Go ahead.
And during the trial, we were blessed with a female judge of color that was presented herself as maybe somebody's grandmother, somebody's loving and caring grandmother. And we were grateful to her for giving us the benefit of the doubt. And, from day one, she had gave us leniency and just gave my son most of the rulings that occur in the court. But, this is something that, like when we were sitting at home with my son and he was still here, and Trayvon Martin was going through his situation, we were like on the outside looking in. And that's what I want your audience to understand, that, you don't really understand the pain and the depth of this situation until it hits your door. Because when my son died, both me and my wife, as well as my little girl who was 10 at the time, the whole family died. And we had to learn, the next day we had to learn how to get out the bed again and, and to function as humans. And it was a point that, that you kind of gave up on life, that you gave up on hope, that, that none of this made any sense anymore. So it's a multi-tier situation that you have to go through when you're dealing with this type of grief, because technically human beings are not set up to bury their children emotionally. I mean, it's a lot of self-blame. It's situations of contemplating suicide, and you angry with the world, and you're angry with yourself, and you're angry with God. You have the inability to smile again. Nothing's funny, nothing's humorous. Every day is a sad day. It's a problem with sleeping. It's just problem with everything. I mean, imagine you have to and still in the midst, you still have to pay bills and get up and go to work tomorrow and things of that nature. And you just basically then gave up on life. And you move from that difficult stage of what we describe as stage one into a stage two, where, it comes with some type of acceptance. And you're forced to accept the fact that, that here on this earth, I'll never see my child again. And that's the reality that you have to live with. And then at that point, you're ready to fight and you're ready to get some accountability. And in most situations, and we're grateful it wasn't in this situation, but most situations, that comes at the 2-year mark when the statute of limitations has just about ran out, and there's nothing left for you to do because you've been in a coma for the last year and a half, 2 years. But at that point, you're ready to fight, and at some point, you graduate to stage 3. And stage 3 is where most people are stuck at, because stage 3 comes with forgiveness. And as we interacted with families across the country, nobody's ready to hug the police that killed their loved one. But stage 3 also comes with a platform where you can give direction and some kind of forward movement to brand new families that's still stuck in stage 1, that needs the blueprint to move on. Needs the know-how. And this is what we are in a position now to offer to these families and to these new people that's just coming in this situation, almost like the blueprint, what needs to be done to get some sort of justice in your situation. So we've managed to turn all that pain that we went through into some type of purpose with direction.
Drew, and can I ask just real quick, Sharon? I want to take them back a little bit, because I think it's important for context for the audience. Can you kind of describe that the decision to allow Andrew to go, and kind of what was going on in your life, and the family in town? Just it was a celebratory weekend, right?
Right. Celebratory weekend, and by us being Catholic, it was his confirmation weekend, which in Catholic faith, that's a big deal. He was in the 8th grade, so he had did all of the preliminary classes and CCD classes to be able to prepare for this ceremony at the church that we attended, and also St. Stephen's Catholic School, which he attended as a student with his sister. So we were in that mode of go and enjoy yourself. It's Friday night. We're getting his dress pants together, his white suit shirt together. I'm ironing, I'm searching through his drawers looking for a necktie to wear for the ceremony on Saturday morning. And then I realized, as I'm looking for his dress shoes, that there's only one dress shoe in the closet. So his dad comes home, and I was telling his dad, I only can find one dress shoe for Andrew. Can you please try to find something tonight? Meanwhile, Andrew comes home from school and asks at about 4 p.m. can he go with some friends to the fair. They have tickets, and Mrs. Munn, who was our neighbor, going to transport them. So he has his ticket. He has money that he's been saving since Christmas from my mom, who had gave him $100 bill for Christmas. So he's saved it, it's in his wallet, and he's using that for spending cash, while the other students who attend public school are giving him a ticket, and Miss Munn is providing a ride to the fair. It's like a carpool ride. So Andrew comes in, and he is dressing, and they're playing music in the house upstairs. And I'm listening to the music, and I'm listening to the children come in and out the house, exchanging clothing. Andrew sharing clothes from his closet. He's sharing shoes from his closets. And at that moment, I'm looking as if all these children look like Andrew, because they're all dressed in his clothing. So he was a giving boy. And as they're coming downstairs, they look like Andrew, and he's looking like, Mom, they're going to give the clothing back, because I'm looking at him as if to say, wow, your shoes too. So many things can happen as it relates to that. So he's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. They're all going to give it back. So I see the children leave, and Miss Munn, we exchanged phone numbers. And I remember writing my cell phone number on a pink Post-it note, because I work from home. So I had Post-it notes at my desk. So when I go downstairs to greet her, I give her the Post-it note, and she writes her phone number on a Post-it note and affix it to the dash of her SUV, her black SUV. It was like a Tahoe type of SUV. And they pull off, and I tell my daughter, who's upset because she wants to go to the fair, with her brother and his friends. I said, let's go bake some cookies just to kind of get her mind off of everything. But I tell you, I think back to when Andrew entered that SUV and I stared at the stop sign as they made the right turn, and something came over me at that time. But at the, hindsight is 2020. I thought that was just me feeling as if my child is growing up and not needing me anymore. He's independent and now going places without me. But 10 years and into the years passing, I'm looking at this, my feelings at that time had spoke to me in spirit that this was the last goodbye. This would be the last time I would see him alive. And that was the last time I saw him alive, is when he was in that SUV, he entered it, and that truck made the right turn. So we woke up that Saturday morning without our son. We had got the call in the mid-morning hours of Saturday morning that he had been killed, because when Miss Munn went to pick Andrew up at 40, she couldn't find him. So his dad went out looking for him. And by the time he got the news, it was maybe like 1 or 2 in the morning that there was a cell phone in the deceased person's body at the morgue. And he called home where I am with my daughter and pacing the floor, because Miss Munn had already called saying she couldn't find him. And that's when I learned that my son was deceased and he wouldn't be at the ceremony Saturday morning. So of course I'm calling the priests, I'm calling the church, I'm calling the nuns, letting them know that Andrew was killed last night, and he won't be at the church in the morning. So it was a lot. It was a lot. The house was full with friends and people coming over. The doorbell rang constantly, people wanting to express their regards and share how much he meant to them and all the special things he had said and done for so many children who were struggling to just live and not commit suicide, and challenges with being bullied. He was just that child who saved so many other children who are now able to, grow and be 24-year-olds or 23-year-olds at this time, at this date and time. But that in essence is what February the 7th, 2014 looked like and felt like for us.
Drew, can you let me ask you this, Drew, and I'm sorry I have to ask, but can you take us back to you being on that road and meeting up with the officers and kind of how they communicated to you what had happened to your son?
Right. So Miss Munn called the house and asked, had we spoke to my son? We was like, no, we hadn't spoke to him. We thought he was at the fair and everything was all right. She says she's arriving at the fair, and the fair's really dark, and Andrew's not where he's supposed to be at, and it's like nobody left in the fair. They closed the fair early. So I said, I hadn't called him, and so we started calling him, and his phone will ring, 5 or 6 times, and then it goes to the answer machine. It's not like it's ringing once or twice and goes to the answer machine, but it's going through the whole cycle. And there's no answer from Andrew, which is very, very unusual. So Miss Munn calls back again and says she can't find Andrew anywhere, that she's making a block one more time. In my mind, that he had got what was one of his football buddies, maybe one of the little girlfriends at school, and he was just trying to buy time. So I told Miss Munn, to make the block and see if you can see him. And if you don't see him, just come on back to the neighborhood, that I'll come out in my truck. I have at the time I had a big old dually with a big horn on it. I could blow the horn, I could whistle real loud, and normally my son will come running. But as I approached Miss Munn agreed to come on home. She couldn't find him. None of the kids that was in the van had seen him recently since they got to the fair. So Miss Munn came on home, and I got in the truck and I went down to the fairground, and I approached the spot where he was supposed to be picked up on one side of the fair. And as I was pulling up to the gate, there was a sheriff officer there locking the gate up. I explained to him that I was looking for my son. He told me there was all kind of activity in the fair, that they had to close the fair down early because they was so it was so unruly out at the fair. But he explained to me that there had like 20 or 30 kids on the other side of the fair that was waiting for rides, that I should go over there and check and see if my son is within that group. So I goes from the Orion Street side of the fair to the 301 side, well, the 301 side to the Orion Street side of the fair. And as I'm approaching the entrance, I'm looking at all these kids out there, and I realized that none of these kids are my son. So there's a sheriff officer as well as a highway patrol officers that's sitting at the gate talking to each other through their driver's window. So I approached the officers, explained to them that I'm looking for my son. He was supposed to be on the other side. He's not over there, but I was instructed to come over here and to see if he was standing over here waiting on a ride. And I've looked at all these kids that's standing out here, and he's none of these kids that's standing out here. Can you help me? So the sheriff office started running his name through the JAC, which is the Juvenile Correctional Center out here. They also ran his name through the emergency room and the local hospitals, and they were coming up with nothing. Then the state trooper asked me, told me that he was investigating a death report that was up on the interstate, and really I had no concern for the state trooper because I knew my son was only 14. He didn't drive. He wasn't in anybody's car. He had no reason to be on the interstate. And you're conducting a death report. I really don't want to have anything to do with that. I just need to find my son and maybe give him a stiff talking to about where he's supposed to be at and when he's supposed to be at, and prepare for the proceedings on tomorrow at his graduation ceremony. And then he started asking me intelligent questions like what he had on and do I have a picture of him. So I pulled up a picture in my phone. It wasn't clear enough. I had to call home and explain to my wife that we still haven't found Andrew yet, but we need a clear picture of him. Please send me a picture. She sent me a picture. He asked me to describe the clothes that he had on. He had on some black pants and a black shirt with fluorescent white writing and some black and white Air Nikes, Air Max. Then he asked me, have I called him? And I explained to him that I've been calling him. His phone is ringing through the whole cycle, but nobody's picking up. I'm not sure if he's lost his phone or if somebody's stolen his phone or it's been misplaced, but yes, I am calling. So the officer, the state trooper at that time, asked me to call him now. So I called him at that point, and just like the last time, it rang 4 or 5 times, and finally the answering machine picked up. The whole while, he was still sitting in the car, and I was standing outside, and I was kind of standing over him. He was back and forth with the other officer in the car, and at that point, he got out of the car. He put his hand on my shoulder. I still kind of remember his face. He was a white guy, of course. He had the military haircut with some gray hazel eyes. He put his hand on my shoulder, and he explained to me that the phone that you're calling is ringing in a deceased person's body that we have down at the mall. Now, Mr. Joseph, I don't want you to get excited or panic, but we're not sure if somebody stole his phone or he misplaced his phone, but the phone that you're calling is ringing in his pocket. Can you tell me what kind of belt that your son left around the house with? He had something funny around his waist. And at this point, my heart drops like it's a strong possibility that my son may be dead. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember what kind of belt he had on. So at this point, I called back to the house where my wife and my daughter were. And, it's a different conversation at this point because now, Deanna, we're in a life or death situation. They're not telling me much, but something serious is going on. I need to know what type of belt Pee Wee left the house with. And she gets to screaming and hollering. I can't understand what she's saying because, in my mind, reality is kicking in for her. But finally, she was able to tell me that he didn't leave the house with a belt on. That he took I have a big body scarf, a big old Gucci body scarf that's, big enough to fit on the table. That he took the Gucci scarf and tied the scarf around his waist, and he left the house with the scarf tied around his waist. So at this point, the officer is asking me what my wife said, and I'm explaining to him that my wife said that he left with a red and black scarf around his waist that he used as a belt. And then that's when he told me that, due to the fact that the body that they have down at the morgue has on the black clothes that I described, has the phone is ringing in the pocket of the deceased person, and the deceased person definitely has a black and red scarf around his waist. So I'm sorry to inform you that in most likely situation, that was your son that was killed on the interstate tonight. So what we need you to do is just stand up here for a little while, and the state trooper is going to come and bring, the state trooper on the scene is going to come and bring you his remains, the things that he had, his personal belongings. So at that point, the officer that I had talked to on the other side that instructed me to go on the other side to look for him where the kids were standing at, he had walked over and heard the state trooper deliver the news to me, and he asked me, can he pray for me? And we all joined hands, me, the officer, the people that was at the gate, the ticket takers, and everybody that was involved that particular night. We all joined hands, and the one guy prayed for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And as he was wrapping up his prayer and saying his amens, the state trooper was pulling into the lot. The state trooper got out and asked me for my license. I gave him my driver's license. He went back to his car, and when he returned from his car, he had this big, gigantic sandwich bag that was marked with evidence on. And he gave me the sandwich bag, and he asked me, did I recognize the things that was in the bag? I told him I did. In the bag, he had my son's iPhone. The screen was cracked in, like 1,000 pieces, like the whole front of you couldn't see anything on the phone, but it was still functional. He had a bunch of his wristbands. Those kids at the time was wearing a bunch of his rubber wristbands on his wrist. And he had his wallet, and in the wallet he had a couple of dollars, maybe like $6 or $7 in his wallet. I know how much he left the house with, so in the very beginning, that was a big mystery as well, where all his money went. And it turned out that he had brought the kids that gave him the free tickets, ride armbands, which was like $20 a piece. So that's where his money went. So at that point, the state trooper refused to let me leave. He explained to me that, we had just gave you some real heavy news, and now that you know that your son is dead, we can't let you leave and drive on the interstate because of the impact that it may have. We went back and forth for another 15, 20 minutes. I'm explaining to him that, I don't want to ride in the car with a policeman. I don't want to have another policeman to drive my car back to the house. That I'm a grown man with a license, and I understand that you just told me some heavy stuff, so I won't even get on the interstate. I will stay on the ground and just drive the car very slowly until I can make it back to my house. So we went back and forth about 15, 20 minutes with that, and finally they did let me leave and drive off on my own regard. But as I was pulling off the lot, I went directly to the gas station. And as I was pulling into the gas station, I see the police lights coming on behind me. I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what they want now. Maybe they forgot to give me my license back. So I checked my pocket and I have my license back. So I'm not sure what they want at this point. But I pull in the gas station and I sit in the car and they pull behind me. He doesn't get out and I don't get out. So I sit there 30 seconds, a minute and a half, or whatever the situation may be. And finally I get out the car and he gets out the car And he comes up to me again and asks me, am I okay to drive? And I explained to him, I'm just going in a gas station to get some gas. I'm probably going to get me a bottle of water. And I promised him that I was going to take a slow ride home and that I'll do my best to be safe. And he let me go. And, you know, I went through all that because in my mind, he was trying to make sure that I was okay to drive. I won't make harm to anybody else. But you know, as time reflect on, I was a grown man with a license, and why they didn't take that type of protection and precaution on making sure that my child made it home safe. And that was my biggest thing. And I thought they was asking me all those questions about what he had on to make sure to identify my child, to make sure it was really my child, the one that was dead before they gave me the news. But as I read the report and I see the statement that they gave to the news, in their mind, me telling them that he had a rag around his he had the Gucci rag around his waist was proves that he was in the gang, and that was stated on on the news that the father confirmed that he was in the gang by the rag that he has around his waist. So you know, all those things that I thought they were doing in my best interest was just basically to collaborate their stories that he was a gang member and his parents brought him out and abandoned him, and in his and just the things that was said just was unbelievable. That his mama was home smoking rocks. That's why she wasn't at the fair. They didn't believe he had a father, and you know, just an innocent child that they had no idea who he was, and just assuming all type of things because of the label that the sheriff had put on him, and that he was a gang member that was wilding at the fair. So I mean, it's just unbelievable. The turmoil that you have to go through, the traumatic situation, the unforgettable feelings. It's just it still doesn't 100% real, you know. But that was the situation of that night. It was a long night. Nobody got any sleep for that 24-hour, 48-hour period. We had people in town for his confirmation. We had a big old party that was planned the next day, and food and the Jupiter jump and the spacewalks and all those things for him to graduate from the 8th grade and to go on to the 9th grade. And unfortunately, he became a statistic that night. You know, he wasn't able to graduate from the 8th grade. So the next day, his 8th grade class graduated without him. And my biggest concern at that point was, you know, I'm Andrew Joseph Jr. and my father is Andrew Joseph Sr. And my dad died after Katrina, and now my son is dead here in Florida. And you know, as far as DNA concerned, you know, I'm the only one left. They stole my daddy's name, and now I have to deal with this traumatic situation within my family. And I remember laying in the bed with my wife, and I know she's asleep because I could hear her snoring real loud. And as she's sleeping, I'm looking over at her, and you know, tears are coming out her eyes while she's sleeping, and her pillow is soaking wet, and she couldn't remember what my son smelled like. So the next week and a half, she spent the night in his bedroom, just sleeping in his bed, smelling his pillows and smelling his sheets and going through the closet and smelling his clothes. And my daughter was couldn't believe it was happening as well. And her biggest concern at the time, I mean, you know, my concern was about our family name, and my wife's concern was about she forgetting what he smells like, and for my little girl who was 10 at the time, her biggest concern was that now she would never have the opportunity to be an auntie because now she's an only child, and she just lost her best friend and her protector being her brother. So eventually we had to try to replace my son's appearance at the house with a service dog, with a therapy dog, just so she can have somebody to kind of grow up with. And, you know, it's just a terrible situation. No matter what angle that you look at, they blame so many things on my son. They put so many labels on him that, you know, we spent the last 9 or 10 years just trying to knock the mud off his name.
Thank you, Andrew. One of the reasons that I wanted you to share your story in the way that you want to share it, I just wanted to give both of you free reign, which I know you probably often don't have an opportunity to do that. So many people hear of these tragedies, but they don't hear it within context. They don't hear the backstory. They don't hear what happens to people for so many years afterwards. Now, you've talked a little bit about qualified immunity, and you've also talked about the families. So Deanna, you've mentioned the families. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as the families, it's the prolonged suffering that has really no outlet other than to have faith, to have people surrounding you who love and support you and who are constantly pouring encouraging words. It is being able to engage in work that is for the betterment of the world. It is being able to come into this space as a family, knowing that your child will not die in vain. And you're going to do all the necessary work that is needed to make sure that this doesn't happen to another family. Now, we know children will die, but there won't be another child to die in the manner in which Andrew Joseph III was killed, because policies have been changed. It was necessary that those policies changed and that common sense was applied in this situation to preserve the lives of our students who have been invited to this place. So we not stop there, but we work to engage in protecting children, understanding their rights. Because a lot of those 99 children that night didn't know their rights. There's no way Andrew should not have had a phone call home. There's no way Andrew should have been disrobed of his clothing and the police officers have free reign of his body to photograph and look for what they would say would be gang identifiers. Those were all violations of rights. And not to mention to be loaded into a paddy wagon, knowing you had not committed a crime and being forced to take a ride with law enforcement officers just to be dumped on the side of the road as if you had no rights. So all of those things are things as a family we see as injustices and could not sit by idly waiting for some legislation or some passage of a right to remedy the wrong. We had to add that as a family as our call to action for all who were responsible to be able to take heed that this was not enough, this was not right, and enough is enough. So I believe in all of the work as a family we've engaged in. It has given us a purpose in our pain. And that is what I asked for in the very beginning, was that whatever divine being is there, that you not allow me to live in this pain without a purpose. And we found purpose in the midst of our pain. And now that purpose has gone into the arena of legislation, working with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and Senator Markey and Black Lives Matter grassroots. All of those entities have help fuel our purpose. Because we know without a doubt, if those purposes are fulfilled, then we have really created systemic change that will make a difference for not only Andrew Joseph III, but many other people and victims and families impacted. So the trajectory of our family life has changed. We travel a little bit more. We have less free time to bake cookies. We engage more in family meetings that are what is our role for today and our to-do list for today. Where do we have to be and what time we have to be there for action, not only here in the state of Florida, but all over the world, you know. So everything in our life has changed at this point. We're definitely not the same family we was when we first met you. When I believe we've learned a lot along the way, and definitely Andrew Soares' mission has been something we birthed through his Andrew Joseph Foundation, and it continues to soar, not only here in the U.S., but in London and Ghana and all these places that we never could have envisioned. But Andrew, I'm gonna tell everyone a little story. Andrew had spoke this probably 2 months before he died. And his school had just went into iPads, and textbooks were included into the iPad. So they no longer had to have all these textbooks. So the curriculum was on the iPad, and he came home with the device just really excited. And he said, as I was washing dishes, he said, "Mom, take my picture." And I said, "Andrew, I'm too busy. My hands are all full of soap and water. I'm trying to, you know, get things done in the kitchen." And I said, "Ask your daddy." So he mumbles a little bit. He said, "Okay, you don't want to take these pictures of me, but these pictures, they're going to be valuable. They're going to be for my cover." He said, "Because the whole world is going to know my story." And at that point in time, as a mother just rushing around, I'm like, what kind of story you gonna have? Little 8th grader, Riverview, Florida, little Catholic school boy, what story you're going to have? And his dad and I kind of laugh and chuckle as they're taking the pictures. And after the funeral, because he had 2 funerals, one in Tampa, Florida, and one in New Orleans, where we're from, and that's his final resting place, is New Orleans. Because I dared not let Florida have his body when they had destroyed his life. So we sat on the sofa after coming back from New Orleans for that final funeral. And Andrew and I looked at each other, and I reminded him of what Andrew said about the whole world will know his story. And at that point, we pledged that Andrew, at that moment, was talking to us, speaking that into our existence, that it will be you, Mom and Dad, to go and tell the world my story. And you have these pictures that I've already taken in life for you to add to my cover. So here we are, all over the world, telling Andrew's story, and we hope that anybody listening to this and the audience that's viewing this, that you continue to carry Andrew in your heart and soul, and you be the vessel to go and tell Andrew's story all over the world.
Wow, prophetic words from a 14-year-old. Well, with that, I think we want to close. I want to thank the Andrews for being so gracious and so generous with sharing their story. I lift you up in prayer. And I pray that your story impacts everyone that hears it and awakens in us compassion, empathy, and a need to support this legislation that Ayanna Presley, and I'm going to provide information about the legislation, the qualified immunity legislation. Is there any closing words that any of you would like to say?
Yeah, and after hearing stories like Andrew, we're encouraging all the families just to take time out and to spend time with your families, because tomorrow is never promised. Every time that our children leaves the house with the melanin in their skin, there's no guarantee that they'll return home. Every time the blue and red lights turn on behind you, you're in a life or death situation, no matter who you are and your economic status or your educational status. As long as you have this melanin in your skin, when those lights come on behind you, you in a life or death situation. So this is the time to sit down at the table and to turn the TVs off and take the earplugs out of your ear, and to have a family dinner, have a Sunday dinner, have a conversation. And that was the biggest thing for me, was to sit down at the table and have to look at that empty chair, and take professional pictures and record your children's voice and all of the little things that we just miss so very much at this point. And in reality, we'll never get those things back again. So I encourage the families to do those things now. Take the family vacations, make the memories, heal the families that's been broken up in our families for so very many decades. This is the time. This is the time for change. This is the time to sit down and have these conversations with our children, because we don't have time to feed them fairy tales about a man coming in the house to save them, and the three little pigs and all kind of fairy tales. We have to deal with reality with our children, because they're endangered every day, and nobody cares, and nobody gives a hoot but us. So we have the responsibility of saving ourselves. And after hearing these stories, that's what I'm encouraging the listeners to do, is to love on ourselves, move our families, and to basically to save ourselves, because there's nobody coming to save us.
Well, with that, I thank you so much, Andrew and Deanna Joseph. Thank you, James, for joining us. And we're going to close for now, but we will stay in touch. Thank you, and so long.